Don't make this mistake with Bitcoin. This video is going to give you a 5-step process to conviction, to understanding Bitcoin's ultimate destiny. So don't go anywhere because I'm your host, Bill Noble, and this is a video about conviction. Now, let's begin with how to understand Bitcoin. I'm not talking about reading a book. I'm talking about understanding it. First thing you need to know is that Bitcoin is money that they can't print. There's a fixed supply. And you're like, all right, well, I've heard that before, but what exactly does that mean? I'm going to tell you. You go to work, you generate a certain amount of output. They give you fiat. They give you paper money. Before you get home from work, that paper money is worth less than when they gave it to you. You got to ask yourself, why am I putting forth output that someone else can devalue? If you have Bitcoin instead of the fiat, you maintain your energy and you keep the energy for the money itself. Now, speaking of energy, guys like Michael Saylor say, well, Bitcoin holds a tremendous amount of energy and it should be worth $10 million. And you're like, well, how do I make sense of $10 million? But don't worry, at the end of the video, I'm going to really drive that one home. In the meantime, consider this. Instead of thinking about the price target being 750,000, 10 million, whatever, say to yourself when you look at the screen, you go, I will never see these prices again. So like when Bitcoin went to 77K off the tariff, you never see that again, ever. Now, if you start thinking about it that way, you start looking at $100,000 where Bitcoin was right around this time, July 2025, and you say to yourself, I'm never going to see these prices again. You mean this is cheap? Because you're never going to see 77 again. You're never going to see 48K when they came out with the Bitcoin ETF, when all the smart Alecs were selling the fact. No. We're not selling the fact on anything. Now, speaking of selling the fact, it looks like all the original Bitcoin OGs in July 2025 decided to sell, to go buy themselves an orange Lambo. Now, you can't blame people for taking profits, right? They buy Bitcoin for, they buy 10,000 Bitcoin for a small amount of money and then they sell it for $1 billion. And, who could walk away from $1 billion? But wait a second. Hold on. These guys who think, well, Bitcoin's not rebellious anymore. It's gone corporate, or Michael Saylor and ETFs. It's not rebellious enough. I'm taking my $1 billion and I'm going home. Well, let me ask you something. What happens if these guys wake up 10 to 15 years from now and the amount of Bitcoin that they have is worth $250 billion? And this is an important lesson, so follow me here, about bull markets. Bull markets get people to get out. In other words, when the bullish people, the guys who have hodled it through 80 and 90% declines, when they get bearish and they sell all of it and go shopping, guess what? That means it's got a lot further to go, because one day those guys will buy back in. Bunch of dumb whales. And you're going to watch this video because, again, you're not going to be one of those people. And the biggest mistake people make in Bitcoin is that they think it's just something that they can sling back and forth and that's got 1,000x 5 minutes from when they bought it. And that's not it. That's not it. It's about conviction and staying power. Why? Because that's the freedom aspect. And that transitions into the second to last point, which is your attitude about Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin creates the altcoin universe underneath it. The biggest mistake you can make in Bitcoin is becoming a Bitcoin maximalist and thinking that Bitcoin is the only thing that there is. Bitcoin creates a new financial system. It creates it in its own right? Because you can do DeFi and you may be able to build the internet or a metaverse around Bitcoin one day, okay? But it gives birth to the altcoins underneath it, like decentralized AI, things that allow you to get away from Silicon Valley. Bitcoin is a part of the AI revolution because it's a part of the AI revolution that you own. Machines will not trade in fiat. So decentralized finance, banking, the whole altcoin universe is there because of Bitcoin. So go back to you will never see these prices again. Never, even if it dips. Speaking of dips, you want to know how to learn how to handle dips? Let me tell you. What does everyone do on a dip? They get fearful. They want to sell. And some of the biggest hedge fund managers ever, there's a guy named Stan Druckenmiller who's never had a down year. Never. And he's my age. And he would say that every time he's long something, every time he buys something, when it goes down, he goes, oh my God, I want to sell. So if that's what happens to him, the same thing's going to happen to you, which is why we don't want you making that mistake, which is why you're going to keep going, because when I tell you about this thing with the bond market, it's going to blow your mind. Whoops, I slipped on that. When it gets red, you think like your girlfriend or anybody you know who likes shopping. When it's red, you shop. No Starbucks, no Subway. When it's red, shop. Now, let's say you got no money. You can't shop. You bought all the Bitcoin you can. Don't worry about it. Because you know what? If you can't shop, you can bet your bottom dollar that somebody else is. Some big player. Red ink is good. I know everyone wants the green God candle, and believe me, that's coming. I'm going to tell you, that's coming. Red means go. Okay, the big banger. Why is Bitcoin going to $10 million? What's the big mistake people are making when they talk and think about Bitcoin? And it's very simple. You cannot issue $175 trillion in debt, and that's just the United States. And the Japanese have an equally big problem. You cannot continue to issue bonds, right? That's how they get all this money that's how this debt gets created. They give people bonds, and then people give the governments money. Well, how are you going to convince anybody to give you trillions upon trillions of dollars? What's the incentive to take the bonds? Easy. You have to back the bonds, or when you pay back the bonds, you give them some Bitcoin, or you give them a lot of Bitcoin, right? That's how Bitcoin gets to $10 million, because it's an instrument of survival for governments who can't stop spending and will never stop spending. Did you know once upon a time the US dollar was backed by gold? Yeah, they had a conflict overseas and they had to stop that because they had to print. Well, they're just going to have to keep printing and printing and printing. So if that's the case, the dollar, the bond market, is all going to have to be backed by Bitcoin. And you're like, wow, doesn't that mean governments are going to have to buy a lot of Bitcoin? Yeah, exactly. That's the mistake you're not going to make. The guys who went out and bought this, they're going to be sorry. They're going to be sorry when it is trading at $10 million. Michael Saylor's right about it, and I just gave you a piece of his mentality to carry you through your career in crypto. I'm your host, Bill Noble. Hit the like button on the way out.